Hello and welcome to some more Star Citizen with dev responses on some major questions on server meshing, server performance, utilization of tech, Vulkan Gen12 Renderer Updates for the future of both Star Citizen's PU and Squadron 42. There were some questions about server performance, server-side object container streaming and server meshing by Shoei on Spectrum, which CIG's Chad McKinney answered. Let me preface what I'm about to say with a giant disclaimer. Nothing I say here is definitive about how things will work or whether this is what we're working on right now. I'm just demonstrating that there's a range of possibilities. Also, I'm not commenting at all on the timing of any release or dates. Is it possible to implement Pyro without server meshing? Depends on how we want it to work. We could implement it without server meshing by making it a different location you can connect to in the front end that's isolated from the Stanton instance. However, if we wanted it to work in-game, we can still be clever about what level of server meshing we need to support. It may be possible to consider a simpler initial version of server meshing, where different solar systems are run on different servers, and you can use the jump point as an explicit transition point. This would mean we wouldn't have to solve all server meshing problems, but would be an incremental step towards the final goal. Further questioning, under these conditions, is it possible for the servers to support the introduction of an additional solar system with players who will be distributed between all locations of Stanton and Pyro without it being at 1 FPS for the server, 1 server tick? Obviously, they're trying to hit 30 FPS for server ticks, sort of like as standard. As I always say, you have to profile. My guess is that adding an entire solar system would cause some serious performance challenges that are probably prohibitive with investing time in optimization. And even then, it's unclear. We'd need to know what the bottlenecks were and how feasible the optimizations would be given the demand on the schedule, weighted against other priorities, etc. Again, another question, will we have to wait for server meshing to finally see the server tick rate reaching 30 FPS? I'm not going to say what changes are going to be the thing that makes the servers hit a certain FPS. It's so much more complicated than that. And guessing the FPS of a future version of the game where the engine works very differently than what we have now, and the content we have is very different than what we have now, is a fool's errand. I think server meshing will address one of the biggest issues with performance, which is density of content, but it's not the only issue we have with performance. Is there any other improvements planned before server meshing to be able to increase fluidity and decrease server load? As with any game, we need to spend time on performance, and big tech initiatives can help us make big leaps. But they aren't going to be enough on their own, and we always need to consider performance in all our systems in the game and work towards our performance goals. There's still lots of places for us to make improvements, for example in AI, in entity component systems, in physics, etc. There's wins to be had. When we get server meshing, the density of content on the DGS, the dedicated game servers, will come down, and these other issues will get highlighted even more, and then addressing those will have a more pronounced impact on performance. Performance is a tricky thing, and the solutions you get from 10 FPS to 20 FPS are different than those you get from 20 to 30 or 30 to 60, as every time you're bringing that frame time down, your time requirements for all your systems are also decreasing, which means your problems are trickier and you're needing to be concerned with more and more nuanced and specific issues. But again, it all starts with profiling and understanding the problem first. There is no optimization without context. So I thought that was all very interesting, sort of like the sort of steps that are probably going to take place pushing towards server meshing and server optimization. There is no silver bullet, it seems, for sort of like, bam, we can now have 1 billion people on the server and the servers are going to be great. But there is a war being waged now on trying to get them as best they can, and lots of little battles for performance, optimizations, improvements, and rapid iteration that's going on with this sort of like netcode and servers and all that sort of stuff. They're building towards it with lots of little pieces and some more major ones. Rooster7755 asked, is there server streaming with server-side object container streaming currently in game? The very active Chad McKinney responded again, we have an initial implementation of SOC, server-side object container streaming, in 3.8 using a prototype backend, but there is still more work to finalize the implementation to use our new persistence backend and also to support global persistence, which is currently underway. I believe this is actually also deemed full persistence, where objects can be moved and it saves locational information very specifically to exactly where that location is or ship is or all that sort of stuff. There is no server meshing right now, as the full persistent SOCs implementation is a requirement for server meshing, as well as a host of gameplay changes, not to mention the fundamental network functionality, all of which is either underway or scheduled currently. We're getting there, just not there yet. There was questions on Vulkan and DirectX. We know that CIG are going to move to Vulkan and DirectX in the short term, so they're sort of like going to be supporting both. Then they're going to move fully over to Vulkan support for a focused hardware neutral approach for its renderer, and then they can focus on that optimization. This is otherwise known as the Gen12 renderer that they are building. That Gen12 renderer is specifically talking about Star Citizen and not any other tech in the world. I know like there is other stuff that sounds similar to that, and there's other tech that uses Gen12 renderer as sort of like a tagline, but this is specifically talking about Star Citizen's own home brand Gen12 renderer and its evolved Lumberyard engine that it uses. Obviously, it was using Lumberyard, sort of still is, but it's its own branch of Lumberyard. Ben Parry talked more about this. Calling it Gen 12 internally was, I think, my suggestion, he said, but Ben Parry's suggestion, not BoredGamers. It was just to avoid the trap of naming something new renderer or whatever, and being stuck with that name for years to come. Unfortunate, though, that Intel called something Gen 12 at the same time, but that's a totally different thing. Until we switch to Gen 12, everything's using something named X Renderer D3D9, which runs Direct3D, DirectX 11 stuff. Names are hard. That's not our fault, though. We are allowing for the Direct3D, DirectX 11 implementation to be a bit clumsy and weird, so the final version can be efficient, is the idea. Obviously, they are moving fully over to Vulkan conversion at a later date, and their implementation doesn't merge any code from Cryard or Lumberyard's Vulkan conversions. Bear in mind that with cinematics, lighting detail can be a bit nicer. So when you've seen things like the Squadron 42 teaser visuals that were released at the end of 2019, every shot can be precisely set up to get the nicest view. Tricksy cinematic lighting can be applied for each shot. Hair has been challenging tech-wise, and there are certainly different assets at different qualities now, but there is definitely some nice hair in engine. Star Citizen's engine is reportedly scalable to 30 CPU cores internally at the moment. I think from the monthly report there was that. The idea is that a lot of time-consuming work that's currently on a single dedicated renderer thread in the future can be handed off in pieces to the job system that manages other multi-threading, letting us build the GPU command lists in parallel. So you're going to have much more efficient usage of system resources. There were questions on secondary viewpoints and the render-to-texture tech from Old Red's Spectrum post. That was answered by Ben Parry from CIG. What is the status of the system? It's up and running, it's being used all over, in places you may not have realised, such as mini previews and comms calls in the Mobiglass, holograms out in the world, like the big soft drink advert in Area 18, and I think the enemy ship views in the HUD. So this is hologram stuff, this is stuff being displayed in 3D in certain ways that are sort of like more hologrammy typically. Is it still the plan for reflections? It's important to stress that this isn't a general purpose solution to add high quality reflections everywhere. Whenever we set up one of these views, we have to make decisions about what style of rendering will it use and what features will be enabled based on the time it will take to render and what permanent GPU memory they'll need. So this makes it good as a match for a mirror in an enclosed bathroom where we know that there's only a handful of lights and you can't, for example, see out a window to a planet's atmosphere. The same mirror on a player-controlled object would be like a performance landmine, where looking at it in the wrong circumstances would halve your frame rate. Similarly, we can't just spawn them on every shiny surface. Is there any update as to the timeline? There are a few small technical issues that currently stop it from being used as a mirror in its simplest way. For example, because of the way polygons are culled, mirroring an object also shows you the back faces of the mesh, effectively turning it inside out. None of these are likely to be huge problems, but there are likely a lot of those little snags hiding in different systems. They go on to talk about, will secondary viewports be available on HUDs or to assist with hangar landings? So they basically say there that they're not keen on adding general purpose cameras on arbitrary places all the time everywhere in the verse because they're a performance nightmare. However, that's not to say that no view like this could possibly work. The graphics team has generally argued for these kinds of features to be presented as kind of a scanner view, which would mean it could have a visually appealing non-photorealistic look and give us freedom to leave out major performance sinks that you don't actually need or would actively interfere with landing. For instance, volumetric fog has major performance and memory costs, but landing in fog is probably harder, so why not have a scanner that doesn't see fog at all? So I really like that. I think they're still planning to have the low resolution landing camera, sort of like something on your HUD, something on your ship MFDs that will allow you to see the ground when you're landing in some sort of like very low resolution, non-invasive resource-wise way. I think that's what they're sort of like planning for that. And that's it for today and the dev responses. I hope that was somewhat informative. Do you have any more questions? I want to start creating some threads on Spectrum and poking devs about very specific things as they're working from home. A lot of stuff does get answered by the devs or has previously been answered, but I'm hoping that we can get some more questions together, especially with Star Citizen's evolving tech, and I'm hoping that they might be a bit more active on forums and responsive to being poked, because, as I said, working from home, maybe they're more into doing the answering and responding in AMAs. Are you excited for the Gen 12 Renderer and Vulkan stuff? This should have the game running much more scalably and better looking, and potentially work much better on all hardware, which I'm very, very, very excited about. What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below, though. I hope you're not getting too much cabin fever. If you are stuck indoors, reach out if you need to. Make sure you reach out to other fellow humans if you are doing well and you think someone else is not as well. Staying in contact and socializing is, I think, very, very healthy to do online at the moment. And yeah, I'm worried about people's loneliness. But if you're lonely, say hello. Hello. For April, we are giving away a Cutlass Black and Star Citizen game package. Just comment on any of my videos made during this month of April to be in for a chance of winning that. I am a shill for a couple of companies, NordVPN and NordPass. If you are looking for a VPN or a password management system, I recommend you check them out. They've got many benefits over free services, and as I'm pretty security conscious, I love those kind of services. Also, there's Shadow. If you are thinking about getting a new gaming rig or upgrading your gaming PC for Star Citizen or whatever, then consider Shadow instead. It is a internet cloud-based subscription service like Stadia, like GeForce Now, but this one gives you access to a full Windows 10 environment which is fully customizable, and that is significantly better in my opinion, allowing you to do a lot more with it. Check out the links below for them or use the code BoredGamer for discount. Also, if you wish to support the channel further, there is Patreon, there's the YouTube join member button down below. That really helps. This is a community supported channel and I wouldn't be able to do what I do without the support that I get. If you want to share these videos, if you want to comment, give feedback, whatever, that is also hugely appreciated. Thanks very much for watching, guys. You take care and I'll see you in the verse.